Hey guys, I am Naguura and today we're going to be talking about how to get the most DPS out of your class on Huntsman Altimor. First of all, let's make sure you understand the boss fight properly. Make sure you understand either the heroic version of the fight, if you're going for that, or the mythic version of the fight, if that's what you're preparing for. This is not a boss guide by any means, so make sure you pause the video right here. If you haven't understood the fight yet, make sure you watch a guide or read a guide, whatever you need to do to understand this fight properly. So to make sure we play this fight properly, first of all, we need to make sure we have a proper UI and proper WeakAuras to make sure we can react to all of the abilities that are happening that are crucial in this fight. For this boss, I use 3 to 4 WeakAuras. I personally think that you shouldn't overload your interface with a million WeakAuras because I think it's just going to overload your UI. It's going to overwhelm you, and some of the WeakAuras are just going to randomly pop up and then you don't even know what they do, why they're there, and it's going to take away the significance of the really important WeakAuras. So that's why I personally think just getting the WeakAuras that you need, the most important ones, and then you can adjust WeakAuras later on if you feel like you need to see more, right? So start with the minimal amount of WeakAuras, in my opinion, and then add WeakAuras later on if you feel like you're needing more than that. But I personally use 4 WeakAuras in this fight and that I think are really important. Number 1 is the Vicious Lunge WeakAura. It shows you if you have a circle around you in phase 1 where you need to go into melee because it needs to be soaked. Also, I'm going to link these WeakAuras in the description below, so make sure you check it out if you want any WeakAuras for this fight. Then the ones that I linked below I can definitely recommend. Then there's going to be a WeakAura for Sin Seeker. Sin Seeker is the most important ability on this fight. You need to make sure you're going to the preset position that your raid wants you to go to. I'm sure there's going to be world markers in the raid somewhere, and you need to make sure you go there with your Sin Seeker. Definitely make sure you do this, otherwise you're probably going to wipe the raid or you're going to die. So make sure you get this WeakAura to see if you have the Sin Seeker on you. Third WeakAura I have is Petrifying Howl. In the last phase, a lot of people get targeted with a circle around them, and after a couple of seconds, you're dropping a pool off. You want to make sure you walk out at the edges of the room so you don't drop the pool in the middle of the room. And that's why I think this WeakAura is also important. Then I also use an optional WeakAura that shows the energy of the shades above their nameplate. I personally like this WeakAura because I think if you're like the person that needs to see the shades, or if you're like a raid leader or like the DK that needs to grip them in, then I think it's really important to see the energy of the shades properly, specifically on the nameplates, because then you know if the energy is full of the shades, then they're not seeable anymore. Then you're just going to wipe because you can't interrupt their cast anymore and you can't see them anymore, right? So the strategy on this fight is that you want to CC them until they're close to getting immune to the CC, and then you grip them in and you kill them. That's why I like this WeakAura too, in case like maybe your raid leader forgets about calling it out, or you're the person that CCs the shades and you can tell, hey guys, we need to kill the shades now, they're gonna be immune to CC soon, right? That's why I like having this WeakAura. Usually on the boss frames, you can see the energy of the shades too, but sometimes that might be lost as you're looking at so many other things, and that's why I like having it on top of the nameplate. So once we have set up the UI and making sure we see everything, we want to make sure we figure out what kind of setup we want to run in this fight. So this fight, by looking at the guides, we know this fight is a 2-target fight. And the dogs share HP with the boss, at least his main dogs, right? So that means you want to maximize your 2-target DPS as much as you possibly can, because it's just going to benefit your overall DPS, right? One thing though that you want to note is that sometimes the dog is not standing right next to the boss, because the strategy requires you to pull the dog away from the boss. So in that case, depending on what class you play, if all of your 2-target damage is coming from cleave, then it might not be the best way to go all out on your cleave setup if it means you're going to lose a lot of single target damage, because the dog is not always next to the boss, and therefore you might actually be better off running more single target focused talents over some cleave talents if you lose a lot of single target damage. But if it's just a slight loss on single target to go with the cleave, then of course it's going to be worth it. But to make sure we choose the right talents here, we definitely want to check out Warcraft logs and see what other people are running depending on your class. Now, before we check out Warcraft logs, I do want to say the damage of the shades is actually filtered out in Warcraft logs, at least the bonus damage you get from the damage increase, right? because the Shades, they get a stacking damage increase on them once they're CC'd, and then you nuke them down once they have a really high damage increase. Now, of course, if you would be holding all of your cooldowns and all of your damage to nuke down those Shades once your guild wants to kill them, then you would have like an insane amount of damage. But Warlocks, as I said, filters this bonus damage out, and therefore there's no point trying to like pet the meters by using all of your CDs on the Shades. It literally is pointless because all of the damage on the Shades is, not all of the damage of the Shades is filtered out, but the bonus damage is, right? So it still makes sense to DPS the Shades, of course, but it doesn't make sense to go all out on them. So one more thing I want to say is that kill time heavily affects your DPS overall, right, on the Warlocks. Because if you have 3 minute CDs and you use them on pull and the boss dies at like 3:15 or 3:30, then that will be your perfect kill time, right? Because then the boss dies right after your second set of CDs is done. So a person who gets a 5 minute kill time or a 6 minute kill time will never compete with a person who gets a 3 minute 20 kill time if you have 3 minute cooldowns, right? That's incredibly unlikely because killing a boss right after your cooldowns are done, your second set, that's like the best possible kill time. And you're just spiking in DPS, right? Because you get your second CDs. You're spiking up in DPS, and then right after that, you're cutting off the damage and the fight is over. You know how it is during a boss fight when you use your cooldowns and you're like going up in damage, and then the fight goes longer and longer and longer, and your damage goes down again because that spike is over and your damage is evening out. So if you kill the boss right before your cooldowns come up, that's the worst kill time, right? If you have 3 minute cooldowns and the fight ends at 6 minutes, then your cooldowns are just coming up your third set and the boss is dead. That's the worst you can possibly have, right? Or if you have 2 minute cooldowns, then the worst kill time would be like 4 minutes, because then your third 2 minute cooldowns are coming up and the boss is dead, right? So definitely keep in mind that kill time is incredibly important, and just make sure you're looking at the kill time logically when you look at the locks. If you see a person that has perfect kill time doing billion DPS, then make sure you think about it and it's like, oh yeah, well, we don't have this kill time, so it's not going to be possible for me to compete with this person's DPS. Outside of the kill time, there isn't anything else greatly affecting the locks on Huntsman Altimor. So there aren't any more important things that you need to prioritize your damage on this boss fight, or you don't have any like extra phases or downtimes that would cost you damage. So in this boss, you can safely just copy a player on the locks, even if they have a different kill time, because you know that on this boss fight, there's nothing greatly affecting your playstyle. So no matter if you're doing this boss on farm or if you're doing this boss on progression, you can run the same talents as a person that is rank 1 on the locks. The only thing that I actually just saw when I was going through the locks is the fact that some of these like really, really high locks actually tank the Shades inside the boss, like on the camp. And even though the Shades damage increase does not get counted towards your damage, the normal damage on the Shades still matter. Of course, if you have the boss plus 2 Shades plus the dog that you can AoE on for like a really long time, then that will increase your damage quite a bit if you're a person that can cleave. Like Moonkins, for example, if the Shades are CC'd, then you're not hitting them. And once you pull them in, then you're only going to do damage to them very shortly, because the damage increase you gain on them makes sure that they die really quickly. But if you DPS them from the very start as they spawn, if you just like manually interrupt the cast instead of like fully CCing it on the side, then it's going to greatly increase your DPS by quite a bit. So that's the only thing you can really look at in locks. And you can see this Moonkin, for example, did a huge amount of damage to the Shades because they were tanking them on top of the boss. So you can see his damage to the Shades is 362k, while in most other locks, you see a much lower number than that, right? So 362k for this Moonkin. And you can see that if we look at the second ranking for Moonkins, which is this lock here, then we see this person only did 86k So that's, of course, a pretty big difference in Shade of Borgas damage. So that's the only thing you can really take a look at in difference in DPS. Because if your strategy is to just tank the shades on top of the boss to increase like your DPS, or maybe that wasn't the strategy, or maybe something went wrong, you know, maybe the CC broke or somebody dotted it, so they brought the shades in to salvage the try. So maybe it wasn't even like purposely padded or something. Maybe it just like happened to go that way because they accidentally dotted them or something. But yeah, that's the only thing that really can pad your DPS and Warcraft logs. Otherwise, everything should be the same. So definitely make sure you look at the talents that people are running and make sure you adjust your talents depending on what other people's are running. So in this case, let's take a look at Warlocks, because we took a look at Moonkins the last time around. So this time we're looking at Warlocks. So let's see what Affliction Warlocks are doing in this fight, what talents they're playing. You can see there's the top breaks down again here at the top. So you see that we have very straightforward talents on this fight. Like everyone is playing the same talents. So this should not be any sort of question for you, because if you scroll all the way down, you can still see the same talents. Yeah, everyone is running Drain Soul, Siphon Life, Phantom Singularity, Haunt, and Dark Soul Mystery. So the only talents that vary a little bit are the utility talents. You can see some people are running Demon Skin instead of Burning Rush, which in my opinion does make sense, right? Because if you put your Demonic Gate to the Sin Seeker location and you also have a gateway, then you probably don't need to use Burning Rush unless you need to get out with the Petrifying Howl at the end. So outside of that, Burning Rush is probably not going to help you, because this is a very little movement fight. So you can consider running Demon Skin or even Dark Pact if you feel like changing up your utility, if you feel like you don't need the extra movement. We can also check the Soul Binds and the Conduits. Almost everyone is playing Night Fae. We do actually see some Kyrians here as well. So that's interesting. And also the soul binds are sometimes a little bit different. If you can just check all the soul binds here. Then the conduits, pretty straightforward as well. We see focused malignancy on almost all of the warlocks here. And outside of that, we just see a bunch of utility conduits. So just make sure you check that out and adjust your utility conduits accordingly if you want to have different ones. And then the legendary is also the same for everyone, demonic synergy. So in my opinion, if I would play Warlock, this would be very straightforward to me. I would just run the same talents as those people were running, at least the damage talents. Of course, all the utility you can adjust according to your playstyle or according to your strategy. But yeah, seems very straightforward with the setup here. Okay, so now let's actually figure out our CD usage once we have figured out our setup. If I actually look at our first kill of Huntsman Altimor, we had a kill time of 6 minutes with an average item level of 203 of the rates. But our latest kill that happened last ID, we had a kill time of 4 minutes 17 with an average item level of 222. So you can see how big the difference is there. 6 minute kill time versus 4 minutes 17, that's huge, right? Because it doesn't only affect your DPS, it also affects your usage of CDs. So in my opinion, you should figure out the average item level of your guild and then try to figure out the kill time according to some of the logs that have similar item level, right? If you're a guild that is just now progressing this boss for the first time, I would assume that your average item level would be around 210 maybe. So it would be slightly higher than our first kill. But I would still assume, since it is the first kill that you're doing, that people are not going to play the boss perfectly. And therefore, I would assume that your kill time is going to be between 5 and 6 minutes. Again, this is just an assumption. Really make sure you look through the logs and find similar guilds to make sure you figure out the perfect kill time. But yeah, between 5 and 6 minutes, I would say, is the kill time if you kill this boss for the first time with an average item level of 210 approximately. And this means that you theoretically would get a second potion on this fight. Because if you use a potion on the pull and then you use it 5 minutes in, you can get 2. But if we actually look at the logs, we see that a lot of guilds are actually using their Bloodlust not on the pull, but later on. This guild here, for example, used the Bloodlust at roughly 3 minutes, a little bit later than 3 minutes. And we see this Bloodlust a lot. Either they're using it on between 3 and 3:30, as we can see here as well. Or I also saw some guilds that are using their Bloodlust at like 1 minute 30 approximately. So depending on their kill, I guess they just use it either in the second dog or in the third dog, right? So if that is something that your guild wants to do as well, and you scale really well with Bloodlust, then you might want to adjust your cooldown usage accordingly, right? Depending on your cooldowns, you might not have your cooldowns ready when your guild is pressing Bloodlust, right? So if you scale incredibly well with Bloodlust and you do a lot of damage during it, then you definitely want to make sure that you're adjusting your cooldown usage to make sure all of your cooldowns are ready when that Bloodlust is being popped. So inform yourself to when your guild is actually using that last. So ask your raid leader or your officers, are we lasting on pull? Are we lasting at 3:30, at 1:30? When are we lasting, right? And then figure out what to do with your cooldowns. Because even if you could get 2 pots, like 2 potions, one on a pull and one at 5 minutes, it still might be better to use your potion for the Bloodlust, right? Because if you don't use anything on a pull other than your normal cooldowns, then the potion might be better during your Bloodlust later on. So just inform yourself, maybe adjust your cooldown usages. If you have 3-minute cooldowns, for example, and we can see in the skill log that they're using the Bloodlust at around 3:16. So if you have 3-minute cooldowns, it should line up pretty perfectly because you use it on pull and then you use it again at 3:16. But if you have 2-minute cooldowns, then this won't line up perfectly, right? Because then you use your 2-minute cooldowns on pull, you use it at 2 minutes, and then they would be ready again after the Bloodlust is over. So in that case, you want to make sure, am I going to save my 2-minute cooldowns for the Bloodlust? Or am I just getting a third usage out of it, right? Because if you have 2-minute cooldowns and you save it for Bloodlust, in this case here, in this kill log, then you would not be getting a third usage, right? Because then you use it on pull, you use it at 3:16, and then you won't get a third set of cooldowns. But if you don't save it, then you would get 3 set of cooldowns, right? But of course, this kill time is 4:12. And as I said, if you're killing this boss for the first time, your kill time would be between 5 and 6 minutes, I would say. So in that scenario, you would get a third usage again. So if your kill time is between 5 and 6 minutes, it's probably worth it for you to hold your 2-minute cooldowns for 3 minutes and then get a third usage again at 5 minutes, right? Because then you get your cooldowns on pull at 3:15 and at 5:15, and then the boss dies. And if you adjust your cooldowns to just use it on every time they come up, then you don't get another usage, because then you still only get 3 usages, 1 at 0, 1 at 2, and 1 at 4, and then the boss is dead afterwards, right? So if you have 2-minute cooldowns and a boss kill time of between 5 and 6 minutes, then definitely make sure you're using your 2-minute cooldowns with the Bloodlust at 3:15, right? Because in that case, it won't give you another usage of CDs. Right? So definitely think about your kill time, think about the cooldown usage, and so on this fight, depending on your class. So now let's look at movement and positioning, right? On this boss, there's very little movement. You barely ever have to move unless you get targeted by certain abilities. If you get targeted by Sin Seeker, then you have to move to the preset location. Most guilds just have markers there somewhere in the room, and you want to make sure that for the Sin Seeker, you are at least close enough to be able to get there if you get it on you. But not only that, you also want to make sure to lose the least amount of damage, right? Because as you can see on this replay here, the markers are set to the side. And these are the positionings where you want to go with your Sin Seeker. If you stand all the way over here, like in a corner, then you might be able to get there by like blinking, gating, and then like sprinting. You might be able to get there. But even if you make it, you still just lost a lot of damage for no reason, right? So definitely make sure you pre-position yourself properly. You need to position yourself close enough to the Sin Seeker position to be able to get there without losing a lot of damage. And you need to be close enough to melee range to make sure you can go into melee with the Vicious Lunge, at least in phase 1, because phase 1 is the only time where you get the Vicious Lunge. Then in the last phase, you get the Petrifying Howl, where you need to go to the corner. So in the last phase, you want to make sure you position yourself close enough to the Sin Seekers, but close enough to the edges of the room to make sure you can put the Petrifying Howl there. So definitely some things you need to consider here. And then another thing that is really important is any sort of cleave damage or AoE damage or damage gain you get from multi-dotting or attacking the dogs. Make sure you position yourself properly, because the dog needs to be kited around the room, specifically the second dog. So make sure you're not really far away from the second dog, or make sure you don't have to like sprint across the room to put your dots on the dog, right? So if you can see the replay here, you can see in phase 2, we see the tank being far out. Well, we have Barghest in the middle, the boss is here, Barghest is here, and the tank is just taunting the bat out, basically. So in that scenario, you can see the dog is pretty far away from the boss. At least you can't have any cleave on it for a little while the boss is in the middle. So in this case, you can see how I position myself over here, because when Barghast is in this corner, then I want my Starfall to hit Barghast here. And now Barghast is being moved to the other side of the corner. So you can see how I am adjusting my movement and making sure that I am close to this side, to make sure that my Starfall is hitting Barghast, to make sure that my dots are on Barghast, and I'm still making sure that I'm somewhat close to the markers, so I'm not all the way on the other side of the room. I'm definitely on a position where I could still manage to get to the markers. But I'm a pretty mobile class, right? I play Druid, so I have a lot of mobility spells to get me to the Sin Seeker. If you're less mobile, then you probably want to make sure you position yourself even closer to the world markers while still being able to attack the dog. So that's something that you definitely want to pay attention to. Just inform yourself, where is the dog being kited, or keep a close look on your tank to make sure you know exactly how he's moving. Yeah, those are just small things to increase your damage, but every little bit of min-maxing really matters, so do make sure that you're pre-positioning yourself properly. Here in phase 1, you can also see how I'm positioned on this side of the room, because as soon as the dog is spawning, the dogs are spawning on this side here, on the north side. So by standing here, I immediately hit them with my Starfall once they spawn. The Moonkins on this side here, the other two Moonkins, they don't actually hit the mob as soon as it spawns. Of course, it's just like an incredibly tiny DPS increase, right? Because as the dog comes out of the cage, it immediately runs to the tank as soon as it gets engaged, right? So I gain very little DPS from standing here, but it's just a small thing that really matters, right? For me, at least. Like, I want to make sure I'm min-maxing all of the damage, so I'm pre-positioning myself to exactly where the dog spawns. So as soon as it spawns, my Starfall immediately hits it, I can put my dots on the mob immediately, and I'm not losing any uptime whatsoever. And now we see that Barghast has been kited to the side, and I'm already positioned here, so my Starfall didn't lose any sort of uptime, right? All right, so that's it about this fight. I actually talked about this fight way longer than I should have, considering that it's really not that incredibly complicated. But I just want to make sure that I give you my thought process behind when to use my cooldowns, what setup to run, my positioning, and all that kind of stuff, because I figured it might help some of you adjust the way you play this fight, or you even just play this fight for the first time and you want to be as prepared as possible. All right, so thank you so much for watching. I really hope this helped you out a little, and maybe you gain a little bit of DPS here or there. Good luck with killing this boss for the first time. And if you already have killed this boss, I hope you get really high rankings on your spec or class. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. If you want to see more videos like these, make sure you comment below and let me know any other videos you want to see. And thank you just so much for hanging out. If you have any other questions, you can come over to my stream at twitch.tv Naguura, and I'll see you on the next video, all right? Bye, guys.